Yo, 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 yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another awesome edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. Our goal around here is to bring you bite-sized pieces of information, podcasts like this, that when you listen to them, they improve your practice and your life. And profit margins in dentistry are under attack everywhere. If you're a practice owner, you know how big of a challenge this is. Do you know that you have profit hiding right under your nose? You just can't see it. Well, today we're going to help you see it with an amazing guest. She's the director of coaching around here. Her name is Christina Byrne, and she shows you where your profit is hiding and how to uncover it. So please listen up. Hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you soon. Guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show podcast. You know the jam around here. I get to interview the coolest people and ask them great questions. They get to bring great insight on the podcast so you can create a better practice and a better life. And today I have a special episode. We have our director of operations, director of coaching. She's a brilliant human being, an amazing friend. Her name is Christina Byrne. And we're going to be talking about what, Chris? Where are we going today?
We are going to look for the profit and where is it hiding in your practice?
Oh, so what you're saying, let me just make sure I get this right. There's profit that we don't even know where it is, or that, first of all, that it exists and we don't know where it is. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
It's an inside joke here, but it's true. I mean, I think it's important to say this before we get rolling. You might be thinking, well, how are you guys an expert on this? I'll tell you what we do. If you don't know already, because it's amazing. We still get questions like, what do you guys do? Well, we're practice coaches, and we coach practices all over the country that aren't necessarily broken. And let me also say this. They're actually amazing practices, great human beings that have an incredible education. And they've just gotten to a point where they're like, I don't know how this could get any better. And I'm not sure, how I would do it. And so we coach them to improve everything that's important to them. And a lot of it, it includes operational, things and making sure that they are improving their profits. But maybe give us a global picture. Why is this topic today so important, Chris?
I think a lot of practices, the doctors think that they just have to work harder. Like, I'm just going to work hard. I'm going to work hard next year. I'm going to work harder the year after that. And then they're not seeing the profit in the practice, but they're working so hard and they don't understand what is happening. And what we have learned is that the profits and the rewards for all of that hard work are slipping through these cracks or these gaps in the practice. And so when we can help our clients uncover where those gaps are and where money is leaking out of the practice, and we plug those holes, they can stop trying to work so hard. Most of our clients actually don't work harder. They work less, and they're actually bringing in more income and more revenue, and they're doing it in a smarter way. And they're not so stressed and thinking that they have to be on this gerbil mill or hamster wheel all the time.
Yeah. And I think the important thing you brought up, like your effort, it's true, because you just feel like you're trained as a dentist to work hard. I mean, getting through dental school, somebody called me this morning and said, hey, look, my daughter's thinking about being a dentist. I'm like, well, they got to be willing to work hard, because you are going to work hard. And you keep that mindset. And what you find is it doesn't always equal your income, right? Like your effort doesn't always equal your income.
Correct. And again, going back to thinking that I just have to work harder, I just have to be busier, I just have to, just put in the time, put in the hours. But what's happening is, when you mentioned effort and this effort gap, or where the time is actually leaking out of the practice is where the doctors are writing off so much. So when we look at the effort gap, we're actually looking at what the write-offs are. And the write-offs can come from insurance participation. They can come from membership plan write-offs. But I will say we do a pretty good job of helping our doctors to manage those so that they're not having a huge amount of write-offs from those membership plans. And then just elective write-offs, which are professional courtesies, employee discounts, things like that. So just being aware of what they are, I think it's really, really important. Even if you're a fee-for-service practice, you want to be super aware of those elective write-offs.
Totally. It's always good to give it back. But like, if you're listening to the podcast, I want you to picture this. Like when Chris, maybe we should frame this up for the effort gap is like, it's all the potential collectible dollars, at the top. So you might be thinking gross production, then you got net production. And for a lot of practices, that's a pretty huge gap. And in there, you're going to see write-offs. Now, let me just pause there because there's inherent challenges in that gap. I mean, a lot of times we get practices come and they go, I think I'm writing off like 20%. And we're like, no, you're actually writing off 40% because they don't put in their full fee. Sometimes they don't put any fee at all in there.
Right.
And so, minimizing that gap. And a lot of times it's very hard. And you know this, if you're listening, like to figure out exactly what your write-offs are. It's amazing to me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, or maybe I am. It's amazing that you can't run a report to see exactly where your write-offs are and procedures per insurance. It's fascinating to me. But so we help dentists navigate this. And I think it's important to understand like this gap that's at the top, as you start to shorten it, it adds one more dollar to potentially the bottom line. And one more thing I want to just add, Chris, because I love this stuff, is I say this a lot on the podcast, but when you're writing off 33%, you're working 1 out of every 3 days for free. And I would even argue that you're actually working for less, less than free because you got to pay people, right?
Right. Exactly. And I think too, when you think about the write-offs, and you mentioned it, some people think they're writing off 20%, but they're actually writing off 40. So ignorance is not bliss. You have to know what this number is. So we often will say, and Ariel is famous for saying, bill your full fee. Like, I know it's easier to just have your contracted amount in the ledger, but you are missing so much awareness of where that money and where that effort is going. And I will say one more thing about write-offs. The number and the percentage of the write-off is just a piece of the story, because we do see that some doctors, their fees are set so low that their write-offs are like, hey, I'm only writing off 10 or 12%, no big deal. But their actual fees are in line with what the insurance is paying, and that is not cool either. And then we could do a whole other podcast on fee balancing.
True. Yeah. That's a really, really great point. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is so true. You've got to evaluate each one of these points. And I think, the first step is like just being aware, like tracking this. Now, here's what we do. I'm going to take you back behind the curtains and show you what we do here. So like, we make our doctors document all of their potential production in the effort gap. And so we can actually see where every potential dollar exists. And I think that's the first step, is you have to be aware. Now, most of them have chest pain after the first month or second month, but that's okay. We just have to improve that. And in that, we also, before we get to the next gap, you have to sit down and evaluate your participation agreements. Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So again, going back to seeing who are you participating with? Are you participating with one insurance plan, with 5 insurance plans? We are not in the business of saying just drop them all tomorrow. We have a very strategic way of doing it. And believe it or not, it doesn't even start with the numbers. It starts with the verbal skills. It starts with training our team to have an open mindset around what insurance is and what it isn't, and communicating that to the patients. So, there's just so much to it. And we have a roadmap where doctors can actually write down every single insurance plan, every patient that's part of that plan, everything we bill for it, what we collect for that plan, so that your coach can really help you to strategize and start little by little just reducing your liability when it comes to the insurances.
Yeah. And so when we talk about profit dollars, because in the end, it doesn't matter how much you produce. It actually doesn't even matter how much you collect. It does, kind of. It's what you keep, which are your profits after your loans have been paid, all that kind of stuff.
Right,
So the number one place it hides for most of our practices, I'm saying a generalization, is usually in the effort gap. I mean, they're just working hard and they don't even know it. And a lot of times their proxies, which are false proxies, are pointed to gross production. So they're
right.
It's the old adage, a $1.5 million practice is not a $1.5 million practice. You have to see what's behind each one of those to understand the complexity. So that's the effort gap.
Right.
And that's the number one place.
Two practices side by side producing 1.5 are not the same either. One, it maybe has, a profit margin of 40% and one has a profit margin of 2% because of all of those other gaps in between, which we will get to.
Yeah. And again, we're here because we care so much about this. It is very, very, very dangerous to have a $6 million practice and say, I have no money. And it's not unusual for us to find that. They're just working so hard to service this top line that after everyone gets paid, there's no cash left back. So our goal is to help you understand where the profit is hiding. So it's hiding in effort gap number one. Right. Where's the second place it's hiding, Chris?
It's hiding in the collections gap.
Ooh, what does that mean?
So oftentimes we think, I'm producing, we'll use this example, 1.5. And so I know I can collect on that. Well, you can't. Your production is based on that and your overhead is based on that production, but you really have to be careful about understanding what you're actually able to collect on. So you are only allowed to collect if you are participating, even if you're not, but whatever your write-offs are, they're gone. Like just put them aside because you cannot collect on those. So what we are looking at is your net production. So you've got your gross production, you subtract your write-offs, now you have your net production, and that's what you can collect on. So our goal for every client is to collect 100% of their net collection.
Yeah.
Because
but Chris,
your net production, of your net production.
Yeah, but we're at 95%. That's like an A in school, right?
You may say that. And I actually have an example that I can. So you say 95%. I'll give you one better. And let's say we're collecting 96%. Okay.
Ooh, yeah. Go.
Okay, great. We're collecting 96%. That's fantastic. Well, let's say I'm a 2-doctor practice and last month I produced, my net production was $200,000, right? So 96% of that is $192,000. That's pretty good. I'm not collecting $8,000 this month. Okay, big deal. At the end of the year, that's $96,000. So there are tens of thousands of dollars in that 4% gap that you have. So I mean, it is imperative that you collect every single dollar that you are able to collect. And it could be that our financial systems are not up to par, and we always recommend looking at those again. Again, going back to verbal skills, maybe we need to do a better job of collecting everything that we can collect on the day of service, because once it leaves the practice, it is way harder to get back into the practice.
Yeah, so well said. Just think about this. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect. Let's say Sally at the front is doing 96%, just like Chris suggested. Let's get her to 97.
Yeah.
Then to 98%. Like every single dollar. Think about this. Every single dollar in your practice, if you change nothing, is now one more dollar of profit because your overhead's going to stay the same. All of your loans are going to stay the same, blah, 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 blah. So I am a big fan of making sure that we make each one of these components healthy and adding to the bottom. I would also argue that that's the tip of the iceberg. If you're collecting 96%, there's some fear at the front of around money. You're probably not charging the fees you should charge. You're probably not as good at verbal skills. And here's the cool part. All of this is fixable. It's all fixable. All you have to do is have a great coach like Chris and team members that are willing to say, okay, how should this be? Because really with great verbal skills and great systems, any practice can tighten that gap, right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I mean, really, wouldn't you want to have an extra $96,000 at the end of the year?
No, don't need it. Don't need it. I'll just complain about cotton rolls and how much they are. Okay, that's a little dental comedy for you. It's crazy. But we hear this stuff. People get so mad about the dumbest things.
Oh my
Like
God.
you're so mad about what supplies cost when you're losing that kind of money at the top.
That is exactly the point. I have seen this where doctors are complaining that there are too many 2x2s on the sheet, or, on the tray when they're coming in for an exam, and yet they're letting $8,000 a month go out the door without, tightening up their financial systems.
Totally agree. So when you think about your practice, the first place your profit's hiding is your effort gap. Then it's hiding in the collections gap. And where's the third place profit is hiding?
Speaking of 2x2s and cotton rolls, it is hiding in the overhead gap.
Yep.
So the overhead gap.
What is that? Tell me what that is. My overhead it's been the same forever. What's an overhead gap?
So the overhead gap is anything that basically your overhead is your expenses. So it's anything from every pen you buy, every Post-it you buy, toilet paper roll you buy, supplies for the practice, your team compensation, it's marketing, it's operational expenses, like anything that you need to run the front office. So every expense is part of overhead other than the doctor's salaries. And so it is really a place where we have a lot of freedom to look at some of those variable or flexible expenses and try to tighten them up with some really good budgeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And two, when you think about your overhead gap, there's two things I would highly recommend if you're listening. Number one is you got to get a great coach like Chris and just take a look at this every single month. Now, what happens with awareness, I've heard this so many times, is like, why am I spending $5,000 a month on this? And I'm like, I don't know. It's your practice. And they didn't even know that they were spending that much. So awareness is the first thing. The second thing, and I'm going to be the old timer in the room, 31 years of doing this. Back in the day when people go, my overhead's like 60% and my overhead's 55%, it was actually kind of a legitimate conversation because you could compare overheads. Now, that is not a relevant conversation because your overhead, true, is a function of your collections and the costs associated with them. But really, you're servicing dentistry with write-offs. It's put it in a whole different place. So when somebody says I have a 50% overhead or I have an 80% overhead, it requires further examination because you look at these practices, $1.5 million practice, another $1.5 million. One has 4 people at the front and writes off a ton. One has 2 people at the front and writes off a little. The overhead is totally different, right?
Yes, for sure, for sure. And
So,
going back to the idea of our effort gap. So your overhead is a reflection of what your gross production is, not your net production. So I have to have this many people in place to produce the 1.5, but if my net production after all of my write-offs is only 800,000, I am so well behind the 8 ball at this point that it's really difficult to kind of wrap our heads around it. And we do get a lot of clients who are in that situation. So again, the first step is just like getting the numbers. Like, let's take a look at that P&L. We're going to dissect every single piece of this, and we're going to look at your PPOs. We're going to look at all of this and figure out how can we reduce, some of these, even the collections gap, right? So we talked about collecting every single dollar that we can because your overhead is also a reflection of what your collections are. So your overhead is a percentage of your collections. And so the more you can increase your collections, the lower your overhead will be.
yeah. And just one more thing I want to add about this area of your practice. I will say this, and this is anecdotal. I've never met a dentist that has an overhead higher than 70% that's relaxed because you can't. Because we live in the state of Wisconsin and they have this thing called snow and it can shut down several days of your practice, which dramatically impacts what's left over, which is the margin. So if you ever run into a dentist who's like, don't worry what your overhead, that's silly. That's like saying, don't worry what your cholesterol is and your blood pressure. You're good. Just keep running. No, it's an indicator of how much margin is left.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to be smart about this. And I'll just say one last thing because I can't help myself. Someday you're going to sell your practice. And if I was buying practices, which I don't, I would only want to buy the profitable ones. So if you come to me with a 75% or 80% overhead, I'm going to tell you, I don't want it because it's not profitable. I'm going to have to put a lot of energy into changing this practice because I have to have profit at the end of the day. We also teach young dentists too. So again, we coach young dentists. You got to buy a profitable practice. Don't buy a practice that's not profitable because it's going to take you forever to turn it around. Mm-hmm. So important stuff. But anything else you would add before we go to gap number 4?
Just that it's really important to look at each of those categories of overhead and make sure that they are falling in line with industry standards, which we do measure our clients against what the industry standards are. So the easiest one probably is your supply budget. And we have some really, really cool trackers and forms and resources for that as well in the BPA that doctors can just kind of plug in their numbers and look at it and set a budget and making sure that we're paying attention to it every single month. A lot of times we don't have a budget, the doctors don't have a budget, and they're just ordering everything. And they go into the supply closet and there's 1,200 boxes of gloves and we ran out of bonding agent yesterday.
Yeah, that's fun. Not. So, yeah, you know who you are when that happens. So, so that's the third place profit is hiding. Where's the fourth place profit's hiding?
This is the interesting one. So this is the one that a lot of doctors don't even pay attention to. It's the one that a lot of accountants don't even pay attention to. And it's your cash flow gap. So oftentimes your P&L stops at where net profit is. Right. So your accountant's saying, hey, everything looks great and it looks like you're super profitable. You've got this great net profit, but then you're saying, I have no money. Like, where is my money going? So we have brought this one level down into the cash flow gap. So you are actually taxed on that net profit, but you're paying things after that. You're paying those taxes. You're paying draws and distributions. You're paying out all of your loans. You're getting taxed on that net profit, but you're not collecting that actually all of that money until after you pay all of those things. So that is the piece that I think we do a really good job of, is showing doctors that, you need to go one level deeper and see exactly what you have. And that's where we get our true profit from. And that's often the spot that a lot of doctors have not really dove into yet.
Totally agree. And I would agree. This is the one that no one talks about. And in all fairness to accountants, this is not their jam. Their jam is to produce a profit and loss statement for your taxes. Now, according to the ADA, the average net income for general practitioners is $218,710. For specialists, it's $345,860. So let me take you into your practice. So you made $345,000 last year at the bottom of your P&L. And your accountant goes, dude, you're killing it, man. You're at the top. You're a GP and you're getting paid what specialists are. And you say to your accountant, but I don't have any money because I've got $10,000 in loans and I got to pay, taxes. You're now starting to creep into the highest tax bracket, which your accountant doesn't account for in what's left over. You're in a point where you're like, I don't have any money. Now, the accountant's saying you're one of the best. That I look at profit and loss statements all day long. Like you're making a ton of money. So you leave there with false hope thinking I'm okay. And then you go home and you're like, I don't have any money. You have to be aware of what's beyond your profit and loss statement, which means your debt. And so you got people coming in, selling you equipment, telling you it's one more crown a month. And now you got to come up with 10 more crowns a month and all that kind of stuff. The debt eats this alive. Your taxes eat this alive. And God forbid you would ever get to one place that I was many, many years ago. It's called the tax snowball. You know what the tax snowball is when you're in it? It's when you don't have enough money to pay your taxes. You're just living on what you think is profit. And then you get to the next year and your accountant on March 31st says, dude, we need some money because you got to pay your taxes from last year. And you're like, what just happened? So now you start taking this year's money and you're paying last year's taxes with it, which has tax responsibilities on it. Does that make sense? So if I take $100,000 of this year's money and I put it, I have to pay taxes on the money that I'm paying taxes for. So that's really expensive money. That was more than 20 years ago that my accountant's like, this is the most expensive money you'll ever spend. And the IRS, they're so nice because when you fall behind, they only charge you like 33% interest. Like that's it. Do you know what I mean? So I don't want you to ever get where I was 20 years ago. I didn't understand this. And thank God I had an accountant that understood what was below the profit and loss. And we don't want you to make the same mistake. So our point is this. There's more profit that exists in the cash flow gap. And step number one is just being aware of what's in that. Now, here's the cool part. I'm going to give you the cool part. We developed a Google spreadsheet that forces you to track this every month. And I'll be super transparent. The first month is really hard for a lot of us. So they're like, I can't find this number. And I'm like, well, find it. And then they're like, I found it. And I'm like, well, good for you. Month 2, they're like, I put it all together. Month 3, they're angry because they're like, now I know where the money's going. What do I do? And that's where a great coach can say, let's not do this again. And like Chris, we'll just put you in your place. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. Give us some final takeaways, Chris. Anything you would add?
So I would say one final takeaway is if you are only getting your P&L from your accountant, you need to ask them for a cash flow statement and a balance sheet. That's number one, so that you know that you can add those or subtract those from your net profit each month. I would say your profit is not going to increase by simply working harder. You need to understand where these gaps and these leaks in your practice are coming from. And awareness is key.
Yeah.
That's the first takeaway. The other thing too is thinking about, you may look at these gaps and they may be small, right? So you may have an effort gap that's pretty good. You might be at 12, 15, 20%. Your collections gap might be 4 or 5%. Your overhead gap might be a couple percentage. But if you put that all together over the course of a year or 5 years, that is a huge amount of money. That is a substantial amount of money. That's a practice renovation. That's a CBCT that you could have had. So understanding that piece of it too, and knowing that you need to kind of plug all of these gaps so that we're not losing that money in the practice.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because that's really the most important point is like, wherever you start, just start.
Mm-hmm.
The first step in any change process is to tell the truth. And that's what this whole thing is. Like Chris said, it's so important. Like once you start there, just start taking those steps in the right direction. We don't need perfect, but when you make progress, you start to feel good about it. You learn more about your business. You start to collect some confidence. And if you do this for like 2 years, you actually say, I got this. I actually know where my money's going now, and I know how to fix it. I know how to mitigate some of that stress. So Chris, you're the best. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate that.
Sure. It was super fun.
Yeah. Well, stick around when we say goodbye to everybody else. But I hope you use this podcast to find out where your profit is hiding. Again, we want you to keep the money that you produce, collect it all, and do all of that. And if you struggle with that, we've got a couple tools for you. We've built an entire community of resources to support the independent practice. And back there, we have a few tools. Chris mentioned them. We have a gaps at a glance tool. It's amazing. It actually walks you through in more detail than what Chris and I shared today. And you'll see where to put all these numbers. You can do it on your own. The cool thing about the Best Practices Association is it's a journey you can take by yourself. You just go back there. You're going to have a community of people back there. You've got coaches chiming in things, and you've got the resources where you can figure things out, and we'll help you every step of the way. So that's the gap at a glance. We also, Chris mentioned the PPO resources we have. We have a resource back there. Look for it, please. It's called the PPO Freedom course. It's a step-by-step course where you can take a look at your effort gap and your PPOs, and you can start to create patient segments. You can start to evaluate each one of the PPOs and find out which ones are the most profitable. You can do a deep dive in it. It helps you understand how these things impact your practice, and we walk you through it step by step. And lastly, if you've tried everything, you're like, Kirk, I've just tried everything. I don't want to do this. We can help you do it. We can actually come out to your practice and help you do that. That's what we do. That's why we do what we do. We're pro. I'm trying to say pro coaches. I can't talk at the end of the day. So we can send a pro coach out to your office and help you do it. And if you want some help, we have an amazing team member on our team. Her name is Courtney. She can teach you more about ACT. We'll help you every step of the way. She can also be your therapist and just listen to you about what's not working in your practice, and we'll point you in the right direction. So don't feel alone. We're here to help you. And at the end of the day, we want you to create a better practice and better life. So thank you guys for listening today. If you enjoyed it today, do us a favor, hit the share button, share with your friends. Podcast keeps growing. I don't know how. I don't know why. There's over 100,000 unique listeners. That's a lot of people. So keep spreading the word, and we're going to keep bringing it. So until we see you guys next time, or you hear from us next time, keep watching or keep listening to the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy your day.